Imagine you're at Sunday dinner with your family. Mom's passing the mashed potatoes, dad's carving the roast, and suddenly you realize you're what's on the menu. This isn't some twisted horror flick, it's real history. Humans have been eating each other for centuries, and the reasons? Way darker than you'd think. Shipwreck survivors drawing straws to decide who gets eaten first. Cult leaders hosting dinner parties where you might be the appetizer. Even voluntary cases where people sign up to be, well, lunch. Cannibalism has happened everywhere, from snowy mountain peaks to tropical jungles, and it's just as horrifying as it is fascinating. And yeah, it still happens today. Let's start with one of the most infamous cases, the Donner Party. Picture this, 1846, the height of the California gold rush. Everyone and their mom wants to move west for a shot at fortune and fame. Enter the Donner Party. 87 hopeful pioneers traveling in covered wagons, full of optimism and bad decisions. They take a so-called shortcut through the Sierra Nevada mountains because some random dude named Lansford Hastings wrote a guidebook claiming it would save time. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The shortcut was a scam. Instead of shaving off weeks, it added hundreds of miles to the journey. Then winter hits, and not just, oh, it's a little chilly, better grab a jacket kind of winter. We're talking 22 feet of snow. That's taller than 4 Shaquille O'Neals stacked on top of each other. The Donner Party is completely trapped. No food, no supplies, no hope. They're stuck in the mountains for months, slowly starving. At first, they eat their oxen, then their horses, then their pets. When that runs out, they get creative. Leather belts, tree bark, even boiled candles. If it's vaguely chewable, they're eating it. But eventually, they hit rock bottom. People start dying. And that's when desperation turns into something much darker. The survivors begin eating the dead. And here's the thing, this isn't some quick decision. Imagine sitting in a freezing cabin, staring at a frozen corpse, trying to convince yourself it's the only way to stay alive. It's not just horrifying, it's heartbreakingly human. By the time rescue teams arrive in spring, 41 people are dead. The survivors? They've been living off human meat for weeks. One rescuer walks into a cabin and finds a guy roasting a human leg over the fire, like it's just another Tuesday. And here's the part that really sticks with you. The Donner Party didn't have to take that shortcut. If they'd just stuck to the main trail, they probably would have made it. Instead, they trusted a scammy guidebook and paid for it with their lives. It's basically like downloading a sketchy app that promises to make your life easier, only to find out it's a virus that destroys everything. Except in this case, the virus is 22 feet of snow and a side of human ribs. Now, if you're thinking, wow, that's already the worst thing I've ever heard, hold on because we're just getting started. Let's move on to another chilling case, and trust me, this one makes the Donner Party look like a warm-up act. In 1820, the whaling ship Essex left Nantucket, Massachusetts, on what was supposed to be a routine voyage. These guys were out there hunting whales for oil, you know, the stuff they used for lamps back before electricity was a thing. But instead of coming back with barrels of oil, they ended up inspiring one of the darkest survival stories in history. Here's how it starts. The Essex gets rammed by a massive sperm whale in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Yes, a whale. And not just any whale, this thing attacked them on purpose. Picture a 15-foot-long battering ram with fins, slamming into your ship until it sinks. If this sounds like a revenge plot straight out of Moby Dick, that's because it Island. Herman Melville actually based the book on this real-life disaster. The crew of 20 escapes onto 3 tiny lifeboats, but they're stranded in the middle of the ocean with barely any food or water. At first, they ration what little they have hardtack biscuits and rainwater, but that runs out in a matter of weeks. Then they start eating anything they can find. They even break open their leather shoes and chew on the soles. But starvation doesn't wait. People start dying one by one, and the survivors have to make an impossible choice: eat the bodies of their dead crewmates or die themselves. And then it gets worse. When the bodies run out, they draw straws. Literally. They draw straws to decide who's going to be sacrificed. And the unlucky loser? A 17-year-old kid named Owen Coffin. Here's the kicker. Owen was the captain's nephew. And the captain had to sit there and watch while his crew killed and ate his own family member to survive. By the time they're rescued, only 8 men are still alive. They're so emaciated they look like skeletons, and when rescuers board the lifeboats, they find human bones scattered everywhere. Imagine being the guy who has to explain this to his family back home. Hey mom, we didn't find whales, but we did find out what Jeff tastes like. And here's the thing, this story isn't just horrifying because of the cannibalism, it's horrifying because of how fast everything spiraled. One whale attack, a few bad decisions, and suddenly it's survival of the hungriest. Speaking of survival, let's fast forward to 1972 and meet the Uruguayan rugby team. This story? It's like Alive meets The Revenant, with a side of snow tacos. The team was flying to Chile for a match when their plane crashed in the Andes Mountains. 45 people were on board, but only 16 made it out alive after 72 days of absolute hell. At first, they try to survive on the food they salvaged, from the wreck some chocolate bars, a few bottles of wine, but that runs out fast. They're surrounded by nothing but snow and ice, and the altitude is so high it's impossible for plants or animals to survive. And then the unthinkable happens. They realize the only way to stay alive is to eat the frozen bodies of their dead teammates. Here's the part that sticks with you. They don't do this lightly. They're deeply religious, and the idea of eating human flesh is horrifying to them. But eventually, they convince themselves it's like communion, like taking the body of Christ to survive. That's how desperate they are. One survivor, Nando Parado, describes it like this: "We were starving in earnest, with no hope of finding food, but our hunger soon grew so ferocious that we searched anyway. Again and again, we scoured the fuselage in search of crumbs and morsels. It was a futile effort, of course, but somehow it kept us sane." Eventually, Nando and another survivor, Roberto Canessa, decide to hike out of the mountains to find help. Imagine this: they're starving, frostbitten, and barely alive, but they trek for 10 days across glaciers and cliffs. Somehow, they make it, and the rescue team finally arrives. When the survivors are brought back to civilization, they're brutally honest about what they had to do. And you know what? Most people understood. One of the survivors even joked later, "It was hard to eat, but it was harder not to." But here's the craziest part. The crash wasn't even their fault. The pilot miscalculated their altitude and flew straight into a mountain. So yeah, they were literally doomed before they even took off. This story is the ultimate "what would you do" moment. Could you make that choice? Could you eat your best friend to stay alive? It's a question nobody wants an answer to, but history keeps forcing it on people. If you thought survival cannibalism was dark, let's take a sharp turn into something even more disturbing: voluntary cannibalism. Yes, we're talking about people who literally chose to do this. Meet Armin Meiwes, also known as the Cannibal of Rotenburg. In 2001, this German man posted an ad on an online forum looking for someone to eat. And not in a joking, haha, I'm a vampire kind of way. He was deadly serious. Here's the craziest part. Someone responded, "A man named Bernd Brandes volunteered to be eaten." No joke. He showed up at Armin's house like, "Hey, I'm here for dinner. Also, I am dinner." The two of them actually sat down, had a meal together, and then, well, let's just say things escalated. Armin filmed the whole thing, like he was hosting some kind of twisted cooking show. And when he was finally caught, he argued that it wasn't murder because Bernd consented. The courts weren't buying it, though. Armin was sentenced to life in prison. But here's the part that'll keep you up at night. He claimed it wasn't about hunger or even killing. For him, it was about intimacy. He literally wanted someone to become a part of him. That's some next-level nightmare fuel right there. And this isn't just some isolated weirdo. Armin's case inspired 2 movies, a death metal album, and countless debates about morality and consent. Now, let's zoom out to a case that feels like it belongs in an episode of National Geographic: the Korowai tribe of Papua New Guinea. The Korowai practiced ritual cannibalism as recently as the 2010s. But here's the twist: it wasn't about survival, and it wasn't just for fun. They believed eating the flesh of their enemies would transfer power and protect the tribe. It's part of their spiritual beliefs, and to them, it made total sense. Think of it like a real-life version of Mortal Kombat, where the finishing move is, well, you know. After contact with the outside world, the Korowai mostly stopped practicing cannibalism, but mostly is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. There are still rumors of isolated cases, and honestly, who's going to argue with them? They live in some of the most remote jungles on Earth. What makes this story so fascinating is how it challenges our idea of morality. For the Korowai, cannibalism wasn't evil, it was tradition. It makes you wonder, how much of what we consider normal is just a result of where and when we happen to live? And speaking of normal, let's talk about how this connects to modern life. Cannibalism might sound like something out of ancient history, but it keeps popping up in pop culture. Think about Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, or the Walking Dead characters who are constantly one bad day away from turning into dinner. Even Yellow Jackets, it's literally a show about high school girls surviving a plane crash by eating each other. And don't get me started on TikTok. There are creators out there pretending to eat human meat for the aesthetic. Sure, it's fake, but the fact that people even want to do this is kind of insane. But here's where it gets really creepy. Lab-grown meat. Scientists are already growing animal meat in labs to create more sustainable food sources. It's not hard to imagine someone trying to grow human meat in the future. Imagine walking into a restaurant and seeing ethically sourced human steak on the menu. What would you even do? And honestly, would it be worse than what we've already talked about? It's like we're one bad decision away from turning Soylent Green into a cooking show. Cannibalism isn't just a horrifying part of history, it's a mirror. It shows us what people are capable of when they're pushed to the limit. Whether it's survival, belief, or just plain insanity, these stories force us to confront the darkest parts of human nature. And yet, somehow it's morbidly fascinating. Because deep down, there's a part of us that needs to know, what would we do? Could we make those same choices? Next time someone says they're starving, just remind them, it could always be worse. Unless you're Owen Coffin, then it's as bad as it gets.